Hi, everybody. Excuse me, I'm sick. I'm gonna be doing that once in a while. I am excited to bring on my friend and client, Rose, so that we could talk about. Hold on, let me just try to find her so I can invite her. Wait, that's not the right. Okay, what? Hold on. Ah, there it is. Hold on. I'm gonna invite Dr. Rose Aslan. Get my shit together first. There. Hey, everybody. Hi, Pinta. Oh, there she is. Hi.
Hi, Simone. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. Thank you so much for being here. You guys, we've had this live planned for a good long while, and it's finally happening, and I'm so happy.
Yes.
Let's talk. Let me just give a really brief heads up about what we're going to talk about, which I think is so important, which is how to do activism for Palestine while also living your life and doing your regular work. All of those things are important. And we had that wonderful live with Imam Ahmed Deeb a while ago, and I was just so blown away by how enthusiastically it was received by all kinds of people, not just Muslims. That live we did about Islamophobia and anti-Muslim racism, and I thought this would be a really beautiful second part, because that told me that there's a lot of interest. Like, a lot of people are caring about what's going on in Palestine. A lot of people want to know more about Islam and Islamophobia and anti-Muslim racism, and how those forces are playing, at macro levels, as well as more personal levels that perpetuate injustices in the world, and how the colors are dialogue with each other. And I specifically invited you because you're an expert, and if I misspeak, please correct me, but you're an expert in not just Islam, but being a woman of faith, and being a Muslim woman, and having a really full and beautiful life, and living an empowered life. And so we had spoken privately about what it means to put one foot in front of the other, and to keep doing the activism to advocate for Palestinians that's meaningful to us, and at the same time not lose our mental health, not lose the purpose that we find in our work. So that is the background for this conversation. So welcome, Dr. How should I address you?
Just Rose. That's Rose. I only use the doctor when there's mansplainers involved. Otherwise, no need for
Okay. All right. Okay. So Rose. All right. So tell me, what did I miss in your introduction, and just tell me a little bit about yourself and what we're here to talk about today.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you, Simone, first of all, because this has been a really hard time since October 7th. So many people have just been in this place of just deep empathy, but also deep pain, and feeling the pain of what Palestinians and even Israelis who've lost people who've been kidnapped or killed. It just hurts if you're an empathetic person. So yes, I'm a Muslim woman. I'm a coach who works with primarily Muslim women. In my former life, just a year and a half ago, I was a professor of global Islam too. So it's a topic that I've been working on for a long time. I was teaching in the United States. I was primarily teaching to non-Muslim students about the humanity of Muslims. And what's been really interesting now is to see how social media has changed people's perspectives of Palestinians, of Arabs and Muslims in a way that I've never seen before.
Yeah,
I went to grad school, and then I was teaching in this post 9/11 United States. That's why we have to teach about the humanity of Muslims in the United States. Muslims don't quite have full humanity. Where Muslims are seen with suspicions, we're seen as subhuman, and that's propagated by the media, by Hollywood, by many other contexts in which people see the other, essentially.
It's crazy that you have to teach classes on the humanity of Muslims, because it's not obvious.
Yeah.
That's so awful that was necessary, but it is.
Yeah. That's how it
Yeah.
is. I was also teaching about, you know, I was at a Christian university, teaching about Christianity and Judaism as well, and teaching interfaith engagement. It was much easier to teach Christianity, as you can imagine, at a Christian university, although it was hard because of who I am. They were like, she should not be teaching Christianity. But it's much easier because I don't have to, students don't have presumptions that Christians are terrorists. They know who Jesus is, things like that. So teaching Islam was very different. We start from studying colonialism, Western imperialism, Islamophobia, and media news and bias.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So, where should we start?
yeah. Yeah, where do we start? Well, right now there's a temporary ceasefire, as we know. So it's nice to see Palestinians doing things like going to the beach, eating makluba, which is like the traditional rice dish of Palestinians. It's really, I don't know about you, but I've just really enjoyed seeing them
Yeah,
not
people
just suffering.
seeing them like just do something other than just be in horrible, you know, like they're like smiling and eating. I'm like, oh my God, they're eating. Like there's, you know.
Exactly. Yeah, so I'm just first of all grateful for the temporary ceasefire, and I really hope that it becomes a permanent one. Of course, we have no idea what's going on in the back rooms, so I'm unable to, you know, comment on the political issues going on right now. It's too complicated for me. But the humanity of Palestinians, I think, is a good place to start.
Yeah.
You know, one thing I've done ever since October 7th is sharing the human side of Palestinians. I find this is like my mission in my activism per se. I personally get too triggered by the images of violence and the blown up bodies, charred bodies. I can't handle them. And of course I saw them in other people's pages, but I know so many people in my life are deep empaths and they can't handle that. So I tried to share the human side the entire time, right? So we all have a different form of activism. That turned out to be my activism, has been sharing the human side and just spreading awareness as we've been asked to spread awareness, as well as creating space for people who are doing the work, the good work, right? So I've made it my role as reaching out and supporting those people who are doing on the ground kind of activism as well. There's a lot of different forms of activism. I think we were going to speak about that as well.
Yeah. Well, why don't we get into it right now?
Yeah.
What are the different kinds of activism? Because it can sometimes seem like there's only one right kind of activism. If you're not doing that, you're a bad person or you're on the side of the oppressors. And I don't think that's true. So could you share some of your thoughts about that?
Yeah. So one challenge I find with social media, Instagram, Facebook, I don't use the others, is there's like this really deep culture of shaming other people and very negative accountability that's actually not productive for anyone. So ever since October 7th, I've just been observing different people who I'm friends with, different people who I follow. I've had to unfollow some people because their shaming has been so extreme that it was like very toxic to even like watch their account, I've found. And I found a lot of people in my circles, friends and clients and others, feeling like they're terrible people because they're not doing enough, because they're not doing what that one person said you have to do. But maybe not everyone can do that thing that one person is doing, right? Yeah. And so what I find really important is to not shame people for not doing enough, but supporting people to figure out what they can do, right? So there's many forms of activism. One is just sharing stories. I've seen a lot of people just say, share as many stories as you can, right? And I've been doing that. And of course, as we know, many of us have been shadow banned. So my stories and views have been down incredible amount. This weekend I just started.
Shadow banning is real. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I've like a month and a half, I've gotten very few views and stuff. But it was worth it because I felt like I needed to share, and I'm going to continue. This week I took a little break and my stories went up again. It was crazy. The first time I just had a little break from posting. So, you know, spreading awareness is one form of activism. Some people are going to protest, you know, and if they're able to go to protest, if it's in their bandwidth, if they can tolerate crowds. For example, some people feel bad they can't go, but some people I know can't go into big crowds.
Have, you know, disabilities that makes it hard for them to go to protest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For example, my son can't go with me. He's almost 10 because he has sensory processing disorder, and large crowds with loud noise would be too much for him to process. He can't. So I really can't go to protests, for example, because he would be overwhelmed.
I've not really seen that much at all about how to do activism for very sensitive,
Yeah.
empathetic people. And it seems like the better, the louder you are and the more like in your face and brash you are, it's like the better. But that's not true. That's really not true. And first, I think that's kind of, I don't know if it's right to call it ableist, but maybe it is. But it really shuts out a lot of people for whom it's either difficult or just it's going to really severely impact their safety, right? To be able to engage in a certain form. So I think I've never heard anybody talk about that until you just said it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have people I've been in touch with and clients um, in my practice who, even from like the first week, they had mental health declines because they care so much. And my advice was actually to not go on social media so much. You know, you can care, but you don't have to watch Instagram or TikTok. You don't have to watch what's going on. Maybe some people just can read the headlines, right?
Yeah.
That's enough for them, because
okay.
it's not useful for Palestinians or any of us if some people are having mental health declines, if they're going into depression because they feel terrible, right? It doesn't help anyone. In fact, they can't do anything.
There's a difference between like, oh, I don't want to deal with anything uncomfortable, so I'm just not going to look at it and pretend like it's not happening, la la la, it's not relevant to me. There's a very big difference between that and I am engaged and I want to be connected, it matters to me, and I'm also taking care of my mental health and in my capacity so that I can continue to show up for the things that I want to show up to.
Exactly.
And I think there's not enough people pointing to that difference. That difference matters.
Exactly. And in the United States, I was an interfaith activist, you know, and I was a mother, mainly a single mother of a young child. And I was going around Los Angeles and I was, you know, going to churches, synagogues, doing things on my university campus. I got so burnt out, Simone. And so as someone who did this, I know what it means to get burnt out by this kind of work, because you care so much and you give so much, but you don't have the bandwidth to keep on going. And so what I've learned from that experience is that you can't just keep giving too. You have to also make sure you're taking care of yourself, and I wasn't doing that. Yeah. So that means when I engage in activism now, it looks very different than it used to, right? Because I don't actually have the capacity at this moment to do what I used to do. I was younger. I didn't understand burnout. I didn't understand nervous system regulation. So I just did whatever I needed to serve humanity. It's not so simple, actually, because my son was suffering because his mom was, you know, distracted and burnt out, right? So that's also a disservice to my family, for example. There's many other forms of activism. A lot of Muslims I've been speaking to talk about the importance of prayer. And this goes for anyone who believes in a higher power, who has some kind of ritual or prayer in their lives. It matters so much because we're witnessing what is happening, this genocide that's been happening to Palestinians. We're holding space for them, and we're asking the divine to intervene. We don't know what the plan of the divine is, but we're asking this intervention for it to stop because we can't handle this, right? So prayer matters so much, and I think a lot of people discount prayer. They're like, unless you talked about these people online, unless you're doing mindful activism, and you're not saying exactly the sentence, then you're bad. You're just not doing anything, right? And no, it's different. Prayer can matter.
A lot of people's engagement is like very internal and spiritual, right? Yeah, and I also think that sorry, I don't mean to like interrupt you, but I think if you do have a connection to the divine, or if you do have a spiritual something, taking the time to really connect to that, if that's real for you, and really like praying, I think a really important function of that is that it gives you hope. Right? It gives you connection to something that's bigger than all of this unbearable stuff. And I think if you're religious, of course, it's important spiritually. I also think it's important psychologically because it gives us hope. It allows us to hold on.
Yeah. And for me, what's been really powerful is watching Palestinians praise God, thank God. They say the words like Alhamdulillah, like all praise be to God. And they're thanking God and they're making prayers on all the videos that we're seeing. And I've seen all these people in the West be in shock. They're like, how are these people thanking God and praising God? And majority, almost the high majority of Muslims are Palestinians are Muslim. There's a small Christian minority, but for most Palestinians who are Muslim, they're engaging in this constant act of thanks. Right after, you'll see them carrying the dead body of their child, and they're thanking God, and people are like completely astonished. They've never seen this before. right? In the Western context, when someone dies, you're not going to thank God, right? And so I've also seen this awareness growing online, especially with younger people, like, oh, Islam isn't this crazy terrorist religion we thought it was. Like, Palestinians, Arabs are like actually human. The men care about, they have tenderness and care for the children. They're
Like,
beautiful human beings.
duh.
This is
But yeah. Yeah.
unfortunate that
Yeah.
blowing people's to bits has enabled awareness of the humanity of these people. It shouldn't have to be like this, but this is literally how this happens. Like when when Muslims have been attacking the United States, or the Christchurch attack on the mosque a number of years ago, people are like, oh, Muslims bleed too, like us. They're human. There's children who are so cute and beautiful, and they matter too. Unfortunately, it's tragedies like this that enable people to have more empathy. Unfortunately, for Muslims, who are usually seen in the West as, being savages who are terrorists essentially, and are out to get Westerners, right? So, but I've been really inspired by the faith of Palestinians, and for example, seen a video of a Palestinian man saying, "We can't experience joy right now, so we ask people outside, don't stop your joy, keep on experiencing joy in your lives," right? And that really touched me. It was a video from an American Palestinian man narrating a story from a Gazan he spoke to, and that was like, okay, because for a long time during this episode, this genocide, I've been watching and feeling awful, and I kind of got into this place of deep stuckness and just like mired in mud, and I felt awful, and I didn't know how to feel joy anymore, right? And this is a lot of people I've spoken to have experienced this. When I saw that video, I was like, okay, they don't actually want us to suffer along with them. We have the ability not to suffer. We have the ability to experience joy because we're not in that situation. We have shelter, we have food, we're safe overall. So we don't have to do that to
I
ourselves,
think
and
it's
they don't
like
ask us.
holding like a complexity, right? It's
Yeah.
not like it's horrible things happening or there's nothing horrible happening and you
Mm-hmm.
get to have joy. It's like, yeah, all I can say about it is that it's about holding complexity for all of it. And
Exactly.
I think that's so beautiful. And over the past couple of months, I've learned so much about Palestinians' like love of their olive trees, and about Palestinian cuisine and Palestinian designs, and all these things that really made the culture come alive for me. Which for me, like, I already knew more than the average Westerner because I had Palestinian friends, but I think now awareness about all the things that make Palestinians human is a lot greater. And I've also seen so many, not just Palestinians but Muslims around the world also be really concerned for the safety of Jewish people, and really grieve the deaths and the harm that Israelis and Jewish people have have endured and are enduring, and say that's not okay. There's no sides. We're all for humanity. We all have to stop hatred and violence, and that has been really amazing to see too. And I think anyone who's reading hate onto just one side is just wrong.
Yeah.
It's just not. It's wrong. I mean, you're gonna find hateful people, minority in any group, but that's not really what it is at all.
Hopefully agree, and this has been one of the hardest parts for me, is seeing people who are not in Gaza, not in Israel, go on these crazy rampages, either online or in person. Like you probably saw, it was in Vermont. 3 Palestinian American young college students were shot. I think that they survived. They were shot the other day because they're wearing the kufayas, the Palestinian scarf, and talking in Arabic and English. And someone shot them. And the 6-year-old boy in Chicago who was murdered, Palestinian American boy who was murdered just because he's Palestinian, right? And then you see that there's been a rise in anti-Semitism and the rise in Islamophobia in the US, Canada, probably in Europe as well. I follow North America more. And
Yeah.
I've also been trying to speak to both sides, but it's very hard because so many people are in this survival mode, and they're really very triggered on both sides. I hate saying sides, like there really shouldn't be
Yeah,
a
I know.
side.
It's not like, it's not a sports
Yeah.
game. Like, we just want people to stop dying,
Yeah.
like everywhere. Yeah.
So like as soon as I say something like, I'm really care and I'm so concerned about what's going on in Palestine, the genocide, then a Jewish person will say, do you condemn Hamas, right?
Yeah.
This is like this broken record.
Like, yeah.
Like it's not possible to talk about Palestinians without also doing the Hamas thing and mention Israeli. Sometimes I just want to talk about Palestinians, right? Like sometimes I don't have enough space to talk about everyone, and sometimes I do, right? And that should be okay, but it's not okay, actually.
Yeah.
And what I've been trying to do is speak to both sides, because people are taking this and they're acting much worse than people who live in Israel, who live in Palestine. For example, I have a friend from Israel who I know from a Sufi community I'm involved with, and unfortunately she lost her 22-year-old son who was murdered by Hamas on October 7th. She reached out to me a few days after that happened to let me know, and to ask me to hold space and to pray. And she told me that she hoped his death wasn't for nothing. Like, she hoped that it can bring more compassion and peace in the world. And I just, like, even when I say that, I have shivers, right? She's this beautiful peace activist, Israeli peace activist, right? But even for a long time, I felt scared to mention that I was friends with an Israeli, because I knew I would be attacked, even though she's a peacemaker.
So many Israelis are,
yeah.
and they're working to change things from the inside. Yeah,
but the idea
absolutely.
that there's these two sides and you can't, it's all black and white. For me, it's not black and white. I do know Israeli peacemakers inside the country. I never said that out loud since October 7th. Actually, it's kind of scary to say, but I believe that they're beautiful people.
I feel comfortable being black and white while condemning the actions of the Israeli government.
Yes,
you
exactly.
know, so that's black and white. But to paint all Israelis with one brush, to paint all Jewish people, all Muslims with one brush, that's not okay. And I realized that I was kind of doing that because I think I was also like so triggered in the earlier days. And I was saying Israelis this, Israelis that, and I was like, wait, that's not actually fair. Israelis are not a monolith. And I kind of course corrected, and I like apologized to any Jewish people anybody that I was hurt by it. Because I think it's important. Like, actually, one of my friends who's a Palestinian activist and has been for a long time, like that friend of mine was the one who told me, like, Zionists are just human. They just want to be safe, and we have to see them as human. We have to reach out to them as human. And when you like fail to consider the humanity of the other, I think that just begets more violence. And even if it's like at our level, just talking on social media, even if it's not like guns and missiles, like that verbal violence just leads to more violence. And so now I've learned over the course of the past couple of months, I've learned to be a lot more careful in everything I say, like not to speak from a triggered place, even if like what I meant like in my heart was I still stand by it. It's still like, okay, how can I make sure that not one word I say is accidentally contributing to dehumanizing somebody else, you know?
And I really appreciate that about you, Simone, because you've been like vocal since the beginning, since this all started. And in like also in noting the weaknesses and noticing the gaps and trying to fill them in, and then also self-correcting along the way. Like, you've modeled such a good way to do this, because none of us are experts, right? I might be an expert in Islam and I've lived in the Arab world, in the Arab countries for a long time and traveled around, but I'm still not an expert on Palestinian Israeli politics. That's not my realm of expertise. I can't pretend that I am, right? And so we're all learning along the way, right? I can't tell you about the nuances of Islamic groups within Palestine that are fighting Israel. I don't know enough. Right.
Okay, I think you're being a little bit humble. It's like when you say you don't know enough, I think what you mean is like you didn't write a PhD dissertation on that subject, but I'm sure you like know a lot more than the rest of us. So I think I just want to tell everybody, like, she's being very humble right now. I'm sure you know a lot.
Yes, I just didn't say the nuances of Palestinian and Israeli politics. You know, I trust I leave that to other people. I have studied the history of, you know, the Nakba, the history of ethnic cleansing in Palestine, all of that, but I'm not expert in modern day politics of both countries. It's not my expertise. But
like, all the nuances, like there's all these nuances, and I'm not well informed. And I'm like, the fact that you know that these nuances exist makes you
thank you, Simone. Yeah. No, but I think what's happened is that because people so it's very different for people inside Israel and Gaza, like their reactions are one thing, but people outside have not been proportional to their realities, right? People attacking Muslims or Arabs, people attacking Jews or synagogues. It's not proportional. They live in a safe place. They're safe. And their reaction should be in accordance. But this outright hostility, this hatred I see boiling within people has been really, oh, I just feel so disheartened and just so upset, and including people in my own, you know, Facebook timeline, Muslims and Jews. I've had to unfollow some people because they've said some both Islamophobic and anti-Semitic comments. I'm just like, I can't with that. You know, I will unfollow anyone who says statements that are generalizations targeted against one group of people. It's outright wrong to
Yeah.
do that, but it's also like they don't quite understand how they should be responding, but this is not the way to respond
Yeah.
to their anger.
Yeah. Okay. So now that we talked about, and I love the empathy that you're bringing to highlight the humanity on all sides. What are some ways? I mean, we already talked about different kinds of activism, but if you could just like say a few words for particularly Muslim women going forward. So it's not for me, it's not for those of us who aren't Muslim, although we can listen to it, about how to take care of themselves and excuse me, to continue to be advocates for Palestinian brothers and sisters.
Yeah, thank you for asking. I think the most important thing is to remain present in themselves, right? I think so many of us, when we're watching the conflict, the genocide, and we get so absorbed in our phone with our screens and with our worries and our thoughts and our monkey brain that we escape into that. And then we become more dysregulated and more upset and more just like pain. We have so much pain inside ourselves. And we need to experience that, first of all, like the pain that we're experiencing when we watch that is important to let it process and sit and notice the emotions and the sensations coming within our bodies. But we also need to stop escaping through the screen, right? So the first step, and this is not just for most, this is for everyone.
That's
everyone
for everybody.
everyone who's watching this is obviously on their screen on Instagram, so they probably have this issue, as I do sometimes. So we all have this issue, and we all need to get better, especially when we're watching a genocide live. We don't have the capacity to actually process watching a genocide live, so we're not processing it very well. So we need to figure out the amount of time we should be on the screen. For Muslim women especially, you know, it goes back to being present, really trying to engage in prayer, in salah, in Arabic, in a really intentional way. So sometimes people pray in ways that's very mechanical, right? Muslims are prescribed to pray 5 times a day. And it's hard. It's hard for a lot of Muslims. In fact, a lot of the Muslim women I work with struggle to pray 5 times a day. And this is a really taboo topic, actually. I don't see a lot of people talking about that, but pretty much everyone I speak to struggles. And so pray when you can, if you can, in an embodied way, in a way that like, you just make an intention and really stay present. Don't just do it because you have to do it. And if that means not being able to pray the 5 prayers, but just praying anytime, just do it. To have that connection with the divine, with Ar-Rahman. Ar-Rahman is one of the 99 names of God, who's the compassionate one, the merciful one. One of my favorite names of God in Arabic. And doing zikr. Zikr is a word that means remembrance of God, and so it might mean saying a phrase like La ilaha illallah, which means there is no God but God, or one of the divine names of God on repetition. So for example, Muslims will often take a name of God. I always take Ar-Rahman or Latif, the kind one, the gentle one, Al-Wadud, the gentle manifestation of God. And repeating that name, keeping it on your tongue, for example, for Muslims. So if someone's unable to pray, if they just feel paralyzed, I recommend just keep God on your tongue and think of a name like Ar-Rahman, the compassionate one, on your tongue. So every time you remember God, just Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahman. And sometimes just like hold your heart and just hold space for yourself and remember the compassion and the mercy of God. Because the thing is, with what's going on, there's a plan. We don't know it, but all this is arranged by the divine. And it's really hard for humans to understand this. Like, why are children being murdered? Why does God allow this to happen? I don't actually have an answer to this. I don't have a lot of answers to these kinds of questions because I'm just a regular human trying to get along. But when I don't have answers, I literally just give it to the divine. And then I complain to God, you know, and we have dua in Arabic, which means supplications, right? So there's formal prayers, there's dua, supplications. And some people engage in more formulaic supplications, but for me, I just give everything to God. I especially like to be on my prayer carpet, kneeling down, like I give myself, surrender myself to the divine, and just like complain to God. I'd rather complain to God than humans, because other humans can't usually handle that, and they don't need my
True.
garbage.
Unless they have a life coach.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Unless I'm paying them and that's their job. So my therapist
Yeah.
can handle some of my garbage, you know?
Yeah.
But otherwise I do that to my journaling, but then I give the most important things to God. That's like, I don't understand. Can you just like help me figure things out? And this is so important. I think sometimes people forget this, Muslims and others, and like give it to God, because we're just these little humans and God is there to hold space for us. And I really do believe that. Like, if I wasn't Muslim, if I didn't have faith in the divine, I don't think I can handle this world. That's a thing for me. That's a thing. And I don't think Palestinians, if they didn't have Islam, if they didn't have faith, and that goes for Christians as well in Palestine, I don't think they would be able to handle the absolute horror of what's going on in their country. So for me, faith is so much, because it enables me to remember, like, hold on to the rope between me and God. And prayer, remembrance to God, supplication, it's a way to remember God. And if a woman's unable to just do any of this, just sit and think of God, and also sit with gratitude and remember that we should be grateful. We can be grateful for what we have in our lives. So that's
so beautiful.
some of the basic things that I really recommend Muslim women specifically, but anyone can do their own version of this, but remembrance and presence and gratitude.
I don't often have a chance to, feature any kind of conversation about like real religious practice. And it's such a treat for me as another religious person, though I'm not Muslim, to hear you talk, so beautifully about the importance of prayer and all the simple ways that we can pray and how it keeps us sane and connected, and be able to hold on to hope. So that was so beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Simone.
Anything you want to add or you want to make sure that we cover before we end?
I think we covered a lot, Simone.
Yeah, I think we did.
I
just wanted to make sure.
I'm just really grateful for this conversation with you, because you've helped me over this time. I don't always find the inspiration I need among Muslim leaders. So my inspiration for people is often from different spiritual and other backgrounds. And so you've been one of the sources of sanity for me.
Well, this is where I have to put on my coach hat and tell you, if you're not seeing the inspiration you need from Muslim leaders, guess who that leader is that you're looking for?
That's why I do what I do, Simone. Like, literally,
I know. You're it.
Yeah.
You're it. You have to be that for not just younger generation, but other people who are like, where is that person I'm looking for? Oh, there she is, right?
Yeah.
So thank you. I received that. I'm honored. And so you are a life coach for Muslim women, and I know that everybody is like, obviously they know how to find you. They can just go check out your Instagram account. So can you just briefly tell us about how people can work with you and how to reach out to you?
Thank you. So I work one-on-one, and primarily I work with Muslim women, but also I've had people who aren't Muslim reach out to me, and I work with them, as well as occasional men, if they're brave enough. But I don't bite. But primarily Muslim women, I work one-on-one with people, and in preferably longer packages to really help them come out with some big shifts or small shifts in their lives. So I do one-on-one. Right now, I have a new program called Rahma Collective, which means the Compassion Collective. And Rahma means compassion, connected to the name of God, Ar-Rahman, Rahma Collective. And it's an ongoing membership program for Muslim women who want a safe space. It's specifically a space that's for women who are tired of the patriarchy, tired of misogyny, tired of all the BS that exists within Muslim circles. I'm sorry, it's hard to talk about this, but the dirty laundry Muslims exist, and it's real. And so I provide
again. Yeah.
So I provide a space away from all the garbage that we can actually like be true to ourselves and speak about things that are often taboo and difficult as Muslim women, in a space where we're not airing the dirty laundry to everyone else, because we have to be careful about that. Yeah. Exactly. So we can just be real with ourselves and experience shifts and reconnect with our spirituality and ourselves in a healthy way. So there's that. I have a podcast. which is basically me interviewing amazing, brilliant Muslim women about their spiritual and healing life journeys. So it's a collection of Muslim women who are non-traditional in their approach, perhaps, to Islam, called Rahma with Rose, and they can find that on Instagram too.
Oh, sounds so cool. I'm gonna go check it out.
Yeah.
All right, Rose, thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
so much,
being with
Simone.
us. Everybody go check out Dr. Rose Aslan's work. And I think you gave us all, me included, some really beautiful things to take forward. And yeah, I hope everybody watching, listening, be well. Thank you.
Take care. Bye, Simone.
All right, talk to y'all later. Bye.